Trapped in a loving relationship, I felt like I was losing myself to her manipulation. "If you're not jealous, you don't love me enough," she'd say. After one last emotional meltdown, I finally decided to break free. Was this abuse or just toxic love? Hello, Reddit. This may become lengthy, but I genuinely need an external perspective. I have already spoken to friends and even my parents, but I have not been able to convey the complete situation. I am at a breaking point. I have been in a relationship for 1.5 years with my girlfriend aged 26. I am 27 years old, concluding my master's degree in engineering. From an outsider's perspective, everything seems fine. However, internally I feel exhausted, anxious, and frankly broken. I believe I am in an emotionally abusive relationship, yet I constantly second-guess my thoughts. I need to determine if I am irrational or if this is what it feels like to gradually lose oneself. The beginnings. We met on Bumble. From the outset, she was very intense. Within 2 weeks, she created a shared playlist for us, and after 1 month, she had already expressed disappointment that I was not prioritizing her more, even though we were merely dating. Shortly after this, I went abroad for an Erasmus exchange. I had an instinctive feeling that I should simply enjoy the experience as a single individual, but I did not. I committed. I remained loyal. Even when other girls flirted with me or when I had opportunities to engage in activities she would never discover, I refrained. She frequently cried during video calls, manipulated me into feeling guilty for not texting enough, and I ultimately reduced my time abroad, returning home early. I sacrificed something beautiful for her, and I still regret it. Over time, while there were affectionate moments, I genuinely believe she loves me. However, I have started to realize that it is not solely about love. It is about control, fear of abandonment, and attempting to mold me into her security system. I began noticing that my personal goals, dreams, and timeline no longer mattered. Every time I attempted to discuss serious topics, such as children, careers, or where we might live, she would dodge the conversation or misconstrue it as if I were rejecting her. I aspire to build a future, but she distorts it. This aspect is the most painful for me. I am not someone who shies away from commitment. I even told her that I would consider working part-time or becoming a stay-at-home father if she earned a higher income. I meant it. I do not feel the need to adhere to traditional gender roles or follow a strictly defined career path. The reason I returned early from Erasmus was to attempt to establish a future with her. Only after this did she inform me that she is probably not going to have biological children, despite my having expressed my desire for children since we began dating. She mentioned she might consider adoption in certain circumstances, but she never clarified. Simultaneously, she began vocalizing her dreams of owning a home, having a mortgage, and getting pets, even without children. I communicated clearly, I am open to possibilities. I simply want to understand what we are truly working towards. If having children is not in our future, I would prefer not to commit to a 20-year mortgage in a quiet town. I would like to live in a vibrant area, especially while we are still young. Moreover, I want both of us to concentrate on our careers so we can find happiness in what we do most of the time. I believe this fulfillment would positively impact our relationship as well. She interpreted this as me not wanting to build a life with her. But that is simply not accurate. I do want that, but I want it to be a shared decision. I have come to understand that she does not see me. She sees only the future she desires, and I am merely a placeholder. Some examples of the dynamic. The Berlin incident, Halloween. We were visiting a friend for Halloween pre-drinks, costumes, clubbing. She became embroiled in a heated political argument with the host's brother, began yelling, stormed out crying, and then unexpectedly connected with one of the girls who shared her viewpoint. She ignored me for the rest of the evening, even though I was trying to support her. Later in the club, she cried again. Recognizing how intoxicated she was, I took her back to the hotel. Instead of expressing gratitude, she insulted me, criticized my friends, who had done nothing wrong, and lay on the bathroom floor for 2 hours while I kept her company. The following day, all smiles, everything is fine. She never apologized to my friends and continues to blame them to this day. Emotional accusations. Recently, she accused me of emotional infidelity because I became friends with my female flatmate. I was open about my intentions from the beginning. I even remarked that I was simply glad to have a real friend again. She ridiculed me and suggested that I must be harboring feelings for her simply because she is a woman. Jealousy equals love. She chastised me for not being jealous when she declared that she could flirt with other men. When I stated that I trusted her, she replied, "Then you do not love me enough." Constant messaging and guilt. If I do not respond promptly, she sends crying gifs asking, "Do you hate me?" Yet when she fails to respond for hours or even days, she always has an excuse. This is a double standard and it is exhausting. Lack of accountability. Whenever I express how I feel tired, trapped, confused, she transforms the conversation into one about how I have hurt her. I have never once heard her ask, "How are you really?" Not in a genuine manner. Threats framed as jokes. Months ago, she told me that if I ever broke up with her, she would come to my home, destroy everything I own, and perhaps even harm me. I was taken aback. When she noticed my reaction, she stated it was just a joke. But who jokes in such a manner? Where everything came to a head. About 2 weeks ago, I finally requested a calm, honest conversation to discuss everything. I expressed that I needed some space to determine if we were building something authentic or merely enduring. Here's what transpired next. Thursday, we agreed to avoid seeing each other that weekend. I had the flu and was studying. She mentioned that she would visit her parents. Friday, out of the blue, she texted me at 3 p.m. saying she would like to come over, perhaps walk through a park with ice cream and enjoy the pleasant weather. She asked if I was healthy and fit enough. I informed her that I did not have time and that I was also visiting my parents. Then she became distant and cold and began posting numerous stories on Instagram showcasing her dressing up and going out with her friends, even though she had previously told me she needed to visit her parents. 3 a.m. Saturday, she sent a dramatic message. "I have a lot to say." Saturday, I received an extensive message from her. She enumerated everything she had ever resented, brought up past grievances, twisted my words, and once more accused my friendship with my flatmate of being an emotional betrayal. I responded calmly, acknowledging where I could have communicated more effectively. She accepted this, then began bombarding me with numerous affectionate messages and Instagram reels once again. Sunday, she proposed meeting in person. I agreed. Monday, we went for a 2-hour walk. She talked incessantly. 90% of the conversation consisted of her ranting, blaming, and quoting things out of context. Not once did she inquire about my needs. By the end, she cuddled and kissed me, as if everything was fine again. Tuesday, she sent gifts, hearts, and sweet texts. Then she announced a surprise romantic road trip that would involve a night drive, bathing suits, and a gift she had purchased. Meanwhile, I am barely sleeping, striving to study, and still suppressing the urge to scream. What is happening? Where I stand now, I feel as if I am losing my sanity. I cannot sleep. I experience anxiety every time I receive a text. I have muted my phone for months because I feel as though I am being conditioned to perform the role of the perfect boyfriend constantly, or else she will spiral. I still grapple with guilt. I know she will cry. She will inform people that I am cold. But I feel as if I am being emotionally held hostage. So I have made a decision. I am breaking up with her this week. I must, even though I still do not wish to hurt her. Before the road trip, I can no longer maintain the facade. I cannot allow her to manipulate me back into a situation that is harmful to me. I cannot pretend to be perfect while my essence is fading away. And now I seek your advice. Was this emotional abuse or simply a toxic, ill-fitted relationship? How does one recover from this without carrying the guilt and fear into the future? What helped you overcome the habit of second-guessing yourself? I am contemplating breaking up in person because I believe in kindness. However, part of me is concerned that she will twist that as well or make it unsafe for me to depart the conversation with clarity. What are your thoughts on breaking up over the telephone or through text, particularly in such a situation? Thank you for taking the time to read this. I want to reclaim my true self. I desire peace, and I require assistance in achieving that. Story 2. After a dynamic 9-month relationship with my childhood classmate, he shocked me by saying, "Being with you is harder than being without you." The weight of my past kept haunting us, and now I'm left wondering, can breaks really heal broken bonds? We were together for about 9 months. We had the best relationship, and our connection surprised both us and everyone around us. We were classmates back in grade 6, 2014, and shared the same friend group, but we seldom interacted. Later, I changed schools, and he did as well, but our friend groups remained connected. We would occasionally see each other and maybe exchange brief greetings. That was the extent of our conversations. I always found him somewhat rude and never saw him with any girls, leading me to think he was a playboy. He also had a reputation as a bully in school. Although he never bullied me, I witnessed him bully other kids, which is why I never engaged with him much. I was the quiet girl in class who did not have many friends, was shy to talk to people, the type of girl you would want to introduce to your mother, and preferred to be low-key. I attracted a lot of attention from boys. I am not boasting, I am just stating facts that are somewhat essential to mention so you will understand why. At one point, nearly half of the class confessed their feelings to me. I dated some of them and rejected the rest. I was never particularly attentive toward relationships, often losing interest in most of the people I dated within a month or two. I dated a fair number of people due to this habit, predominantly from our mutual friend group. I was frequently engaged with boys but never took them too seriously. I sometimes reconciled with my ex-boyfriends and then parted ways again. My focus was primarily on my academics, and I viewed relationships as a way to pass the time. This part might be a bit lengthy, but it is crucial to understanding my current situation. Feel free to skip it if you wish. Essentially, I am explaining that I was in a very abusive and toxic relationship before meeting my current boyfriend. In 2022, when I was enjoying the best time of my life surrounded by a wonderful group of friends, thriving both academically and financially, fit and looking great, and having a fantastic relationship with my family, I entered into a relationship with a guy who did not meet my standards. Everyone around me warned that he was a red flag, but I do not know what changed within me. I was completely enamored with him. This may stem from my childhood traumas, having an abusive father and a generally toxic household, but my behavior surprised everyone around me. I had never prioritized relationships in my life, yet somehow I stayed in this relationship for 2.5 years despite experiencing physical and mental abuse. I lost all my friends, distanced myself from my family, began failing my exams, and lost so much weight that I looked ill. The guy would sometimes hit me publicly and verbally abuse me for even the smallest things, such as going to charge my phone without his permission. He took money from me even when he realized I was struggling. He would stay on the phone with me 24/7 because he doubted me for no apparent reason. I molded myself to his preferences, dressed the way he wanted, deactivated all of my social media accounts, and provided him with the passwords. I was not even allowed to go out with my own mother. I became completely detached from everyone and everything, connecting only with him. He would break up with me over trivial issues. For instance, if I went out without his permission, I would plead with him to stay because I feared that if he left, I would be left alone since I had given up everything for him. I was so exhausted that at one point in the relationship, I began cheating just to escape it. I thought maybe cheating would make me feel better. Although I had never engaged in sexual intercourse, I did partake in other activities with guys. I created a fake account simply to interact with a few friends and talk to other guys. That is when my reputation began to deteriorate. I transformed from the hard-to-get girl to someone everyone labeled promiscuous. I was losing my mind and did not think twice before taking any action. I reached out to my exes and new people, engaging in various activities. Most of my experiences involved the same group of friends, the ones I had in grade 6, and included nearly 5 individuals from that group. That is where I made my biggest mistake. I lacked the awareness to realize that guys communicate, especially if they are friends. You can skip this part as well. Here, I will explain how I entered my current relationship. I finally left that toxic relationship in 2024 after discovering that the guy had been cheating on me the entire time. 4 months after breaking up with my abusive ex, I met my current boyfriend, the same one I had been classmates with in grade 6. One night, he followed me on social media unexpectedly, and I had an irresistible urge to text him. We communicated for several hours, and we immediately clicked. Our conversation was friendly and enjoyable. We met the next day, and by the fourth day, I still vividly remember that moment. It was the most magical experience I had ever had. We were sitting on a rooftop at night, casually talking when he gazed at me and said, "I really want to kiss you," and we shared our first kiss. It was sweet, a small kiss, but it felt like fireworks. I am literally tearing up while typing this. After 10 days of conversing, we entered into a relationship. I was the first girl he ever approached for something serious, and I was his first girlfriend, the only girl he had ever fallen in love with. Before me, he had only casual encounters or random hookups because he believed that a serious relationship would slow him down and derail his life. He was extremely confident and had a great sense of humor. He rarely expressed his emotions and tended to suppress them. He was the type of guy who had never cried in his life and preferred to avoid problems. He approached everything in an overly practical and rational manner, yet somehow he could not think clearly when I entered his life. He was the guy I had always prayed for, ticking every box. He brought me flowers, kept me close, could not keep his hands off me, and did everything to make me happy. Our 3 months together went wonderfully, but after that, everything began to unravel. I lied about my troubling past to him. I did admit that I had cheated and explained why and how I had engaged with some of his friends. He was already aware of this before we entered a relationship, just not in detail. But I altered the timeline of my interactions with them and skipped significant details about what I had actually done. I did not realize that they openly discussed their exes and hookups within their friend group. When people found out we were dating, especially his friend group, they started talking negatively about him. He approached me repeatedly, asking me to tell him everything that had happened so he could properly handle the information when he heard it from others. However, it took me months to reveal everything. I often shared half-truths or outright lies, and when he heard things from them, he would come to me seeking clarification but never found the answers he was looking for. I had vowed not to repeat my past mistakes in this relationship, and I truly never did anything wrong to him. However, due to my twisted explanation of my past, he lost his trust in me. He tried breaking up with me, but we somehow reconciled again. He was the first guy I had ever been intimate with, as I was sure about him. I had always wanted to share that experience with someone I loved and trusted. At one point, I became pregnant and had to undergo an abortion, and the day after the procedure, he left me again. He could not cope with the situation but returned afterward. I also overwhelmed him by consuming a lot of his time. I would push him for answers when all he truly needed was some space. Each time he needed distance, I panicked and bombarded him with questions. He became increasingly distant from his friends, family, and studies. His once well-ordered life was unraveling. The relationship he had been so proud of became problematic due to me. He granted me numerous chances to rectify things but never observed any real progress from my side. I lacked friends and self-respect, and he did not want to be with someone like me. He conveyed that he could not trust me until my mindset changed. Even during our breakups, he assured me he would wait for me. He offered me so much hope, suggesting he would assist me with my anxiety and overthinking. According to him, if a person can lie about one thing, they will be comfortable engaging in wrongdoing elsewhere. At one point, he even cursed me, calling me derogatory names for what I had done. He later apologized, stating he was not typically that person and that I had contributed to that behavior. He told me I should feel guilty for ruining him and a beautiful relationship. When we were together, he would force himself to treat me well, to the extent that I was shocked when he requested a breakup, as everything seemed fine. He once cried in front of me because of how hurt he was. The guy who had never thought twice began overthinking. We broke up again today. He expressed how his problems never leave his mind. Whenever he looks at me, thoughts of the things I did with other guys flood back to him. He acknowledges that he is overthinking, but it is something he can no longer manage. He loves me and genuinely wants to stay. However, he believes that being with me is more challenging than being without me and that some things are simply unfixable. I agreed to the breakup, but we will still communicate and meet casually. Throughout these 9 months, there has not been a single day without our conversations. I informed him that I need a break to focus on myself and said that I would reach out later when I feel ready. I told him I would return to ask whether he wants to be with me again, to which he replied that if he feels he can trust me once more, he would want to be with me. I have a strong feeling that this break is necessary for both of us, as he has never experienced what my absence means. He fails to recognize the good things I have done because he focuses on the negative aspects. He may appear tough on the outside and speak rationally, but he himself admitted today that he is struggling internally. I have read many success stories online and believe our situation could also have a positive outcome, but I am devastated and unsure how to cope with this. I constantly blame myself for ruining something so beautiful, and I am left wondering how I will manage it. Story 3. After 11 years together, my girlfriend returns from a Europe trip with a distant vibe and new male friend. I found breakup-themed reels she liked during her trip, leaving me crushed. I feel like I'm being measured against her friends' partners. Is she quietly evaluating better options? Hello everyone, I am seeking an outside perspective on something that has been weighing heavily on me. This will be a bit lengthy, but I want to present the full story. I use ChatGPT to refine the grammar and flow, so I apologize if it sounds overly artificial. Background. My girlfriend, 29 years old, female, and I, 29 years old, male, have been together for over 11 years. We began dating in school and have essentially grown up together. During that time, I immediately transitioned into full-time employment while she pursued her degree. I supported her emotionally and financially throughout those years, and even paid off the remaining balance of her student loan after she graduated so she could begin her career without stress. We do not live in the United States, by the way, so this is feasible. Recently, we successfully obtained a government-subsidized apartment together after a number of unsuccessful applications, a significant achievement for couples settling down in my country. I believed that things between us were solid. At present, I am in a transitional phase. I left my former job to pursue a part-time degree in information technology and spent some time trying to make trading work as a full-time endeavor. That did not materialize, and now I am preparing to search for full-time employment in information technology soon. It has been a vulnerable period for me, lower income, uncertainty, and considerable pressure to keep progressing in life. Her personality is not one that picks up easily on subtle emotional cues. She tends to overlook or miss things that carry deeper meaning unless they are clearly pointed out. This makes it more difficult for her to recognize when I am struggling or when something has shifted between us. When I was earning a regular salary, I covered 90% of our dates and most of our trips abroad, especially while she was still a student. It felt natural I was working and she was not. Now I am the one studying and she is working. However, instead of stepping up, she often reminds me that I do not have a full-time job, which makes her feel insecure about our future. Many of our recent arguments have centered around this issue. I am merely in a transitional phase, but I sense that what she perceives is that I have less disposable income now, our dates are less extravagant, and I give fewer gifts. She compares me to her friends' partners. You know the type. So-and-so's boyfriend or husband buys this or that, and it makes me feel as if I am being measured against people in entirely different stages of life. The reality is I am not broke. I have savings that are above average for someone my age in my country. I still pay for most of our meals and we share the costs of our recent trips. I never expected her to take over completely, but it stings when she makes me feel as if she is settling for me and that she could find someone better who could provide the ideal lifestyle she desires. The Europe trip. She recently went on a 2-week trip to Europe, 1 week for work and 1 week for leisure with a female friend. During the work week, she spent a considerable amount of time with a male colleague who had temporarily transferred to the same European Union office. They hung out almost every day, he even visited her hotel for breakfast, and they had dinner together after work, along with visiting cafes on the weekend. I tried to be understanding. He did not know anyone else there and she was his only teammate from back home. They were close by default. However, I could not shake the feeling that during that time he had more of her emotional attention than I did. I did not want to appear insecure, so I kept my feelings to myself. But then something else occurred and it impacted me more deeply. The Instagram Reels. I was mindlessly scrolling through social media when I came across a series of reels she had liked on Instagram, all centered around leaving long-term relationships, finding the courage to walk away, growing apart emotionally. This absolutely devastated me. I felt blindsided. We had never discussed breaking up. She continued to text and call me as if everything were fine. However, seeing what she had been engaging with made me feel as though she was processing feelings she had not shared with me. To make matters worse, this coincided with her beginning to reply to me less. Her texts became short, cold, and delayed. When I gently inquired, she said, "It is too cold to use my phone outdoors." I wanted to believe her, yet I saw her online on Telegram, actively chatting with others while leaving me unanswered. That excuse did not hold up, and it made me feel even more sidelined. That moment marked the beginning of my emotional withdrawal. I ceased to feel secure. I withdrew. My replies became shorter, no emojis, just emotionally numb. I did not confront her, I simply retreated quietly. How she responded. In the second week of her trip, I believe she sensed the change. She began sending more photos, calling, and video calling perhaps, in an attempt to restore the previous dynamic. However, it did not feel like emotional closeness. It seemed as though she noticed something was amiss and was trying to rectify it without truly understanding the underlying reason. After she came back, I stopped by her place briefly to deliver something she needed. We conversed for about 20 minutes and she presented me with a small souvenir. She acted as if everything were fine. But emotionally, it felt distant, like I was chatting with someone who had already checked out, but did not want to vocalize it. We have had an inside joke for years. I always refer to myself as her camel on trips because I carry all the bags while she walks around with a tiny purse. She used to love it, even sharing it with her friends. It was our thing. While discussing her trip, I noticed that she appeared tired and hunched over. She mentioned that she had to carry her luggage and assist her frail friend as well. I joked, "Ah, so this trip you became your own camel." She did not laugh. No smile. Just silence. That moment affected me deeply. Physical distance. When I gently touched her arm and belly, something I typically do when she jokes about gaining weight, she pushed my hand away. Not aggressively, but not playfully either. She usually does this when she is upset and wants me to make amends, but this time I didn't. It felt like a boundary, like something had shifted between us. She did not hug me or kiss me goodbye. She did lean slightly on my arm in the elevator, but it felt more like a habit than intimacy. Typically, she initiates these little moments of affection. However, this time there was nothing. Where I am now, I do not think she is being unfaithful. But I do believe that someone else, likely that colleague, has taken over some of the emotional space I once occupied. And because she is not very emotionally attuned, I do not think she realizes that she is the one who created the distance. She probably thinks I am just being emotional or moody again. I have not mentioned the reels to her. I have not brought up how I felt during her trip. I have merely mirrored her energy, less warmth, less effort, and simply observing quietly. Part of me wants to check her Telegram if the chance arises. Not to instigate drama, but because I genuinely want to know who was worth replying to when I was not. I am aware that she uses WhatsApp for work, and she likely chats with that colleague there. I also wonder, does she truly believe that she has settled for me? Is she quietly evaluating better options while I am going through a low phase? The plan? She is away this weekend for a family event. Once she returns, I intend to have an honest conversation, not to assign blame but to inquire. Why I am posting? I genuinely do not know how to feel any longer. Am I being overly sensitive because I am navigating a vulnerable phase? Or am I accurately perceiving the truth in her actions while being afraid to acknowledge it? Lastly, how do I express my concerns about emotional distance and signs of a potential breakup after my girlfriend's trip without making her feel attacked or cornered? I would greatly appreciate any honest thoughts or advice. Thank you for taking the time to read this. TLDR. My girlfriend of 11 years recently went on a trip to Europe. While there, she became emotionally distant and spent a lot of time with a male colleague. Around this time, I discovered that she had liked reels focused on breakups and was replying to me less despite being active online. Since returning, she has been acting as if everything is fine but something feels off. I have not brought this up yet, but I plan to discuss it. I am just unsure how to approach the conversation without escalating things or making her defensive. Story 4. At 9, my mom introduced me to a new boyfriend and whispered, "You can't tell the dads." Fast forward years, I uncover her wild life of lies involving 2 husbands, hidden boyfriends, and chaotic moves, all while dealing with an alcoholic and a crack house. What happened next? Heads up before I get into this, it is going to be a long one. I am putting this disclaimer because I am secretly hoping my story ends up in an r/video. I would love to hear what Dabney has to say about this. So the story begins in 1987 when my mother was 17 years old. She became pregnant and had her first child, my sister, Amy. She married her boyfriend at the time and they promptly got divorced 6 months later. A few years later, around 1992, I believe she met Chris. She and Chris got married and soon had my oldest brother, Arlo, in 1996. In 1998, they welcomed my second older brother, Oliver. Now here is where it gets interesting. By the year 2000, my mother grew bored. She did not approach Chris and express her unhappiness. She did not tell him that she wanted to inject some excitement into their lives. No, she went out and found a boyfriend, Lucas, and what happens late in the year 2000, she becomes pregnant and she informs both men that the baby is theirs. This is where I come into the picture, the second baby girl. For a while, she makes it work. She shuttles me back and forth between the two households. I am not quite sure how it worked, but it did. And then guess what? She is pregnant again, and once again she tells both Chris and Lucas that the baby is theirs. She gives birth to my younger brother, Elijah, and Lucas finally asserts himself. He tells her that he wants to live with his children. So what does she do? Does she make the sensible decision and choose between the two men? Of course not. Somehow, in the greatest con of the 21st century, which I still do not comprehend, she convinces Chris to allow Lucas to move into the house. Now, to be honest, I do not remember much of my early childhood until I am around 8 years old. I know my mother moved out for a while, but I did not know why. I asked her about it a few years ago. I think she mentioned she was sick. I am not sure. I am fairly certain I would remember something like that, but I digress. She moved in with her brother, Matt, for some time. She would even take me over there with her. We would eat pizza and watch Twilight repeatedly on an air mattress in Uncle Matt's basement. I loved it. That stopped when I was 9. She had been taking me to Uncle Matt's less frequently, but she told me it was because she had the overnight shift at work. She was employed as a hospice nurse for a woman named Linda who was paralyzed from the neck down. I had met Linda once before, so this seemed entirely credible to me. One Monday morning, she comes over to our house, where Chris and Lucas are still living together, raising her 5 children and caring for her father before school. She tells me that for the coming weekend, she is going to take me to where she has been disappearing to. My 9-year-old brain thinks, that is a really weird way of saying we are going to Linda's, but okay. Friday afternoon arrives and she picks me up after school. We drive 45 minutes and pull up outside a house, and when we go inside, guess what I see? A man. My mother says, this is John. I look up at him and say, "Hi, John." Then I turn back to my mother and ask, "What is going on?" She looks me in the eye and says, "John is my boyfriend." But then she introduces the words that will dictate the rest of my life. "You cannot tell the dads." Before I proceed, let me clarify, yes, Lucas and Chris are both father figures to me. This continued for 3 years. Mom would pick me up after school and on weekends, and my dads had absolutely no idea where she took me. They just knew I was going to Mom's. They did not know her address or anything, and to be honest, I do not know how she got away with that. I spent more than half my time with my mom instead of my dad's to escape my abusive brother, but that is another story. We lived with John for 3 years until they broke up. Mom never told me why when I was younger, but when I asked a few years ago, she told me it was because John was an alcoholic and she could not keep up with his drinking anymore. She had to slow down. As soon as she and John ended their relationship, she immediately began dating Uncle Matt's wife's adopted brother, Daniel. We moved into a very questionable apartment and things were good for a while. I genuinely liked Daniel even more than I liked John. He was much easier to talk to and he actually put in the effort to spend time with me. And of course, once again, I had to live by the 4 sacred words: do not tell the dads. Things were fine for a while until one summer night when I could not sleep. It was 2 a.m. I was watching Big Brother reruns on my television when I heard a commotion outside my window. We lived on the first floor, so my bedroom wall was at street level. It turned out that commotion was a stabbing right against my bedroom wall while I was sitting there watching Big Brother. We moved out of there by the end of that week, relocating to the 3rd floor of her best friend's crack house. I have no definitive proof it was a crack house, but it certainly was. And again, things were fine for a while, until I overheard them talking about John. I went out and asked why they were discussing John, and my mother told me to return to my room, but they continued getting louder and Mom was becoming upset, so I asked again. I inquired, what is happening? Why are you all talking about John? Is he back in the picture? My mother replied, no, well yes, but not in the way that you think. I asked her what she meant. She told me John is outside right now with a pair of night vision goggles looking in at us. After that incident, things were fine for another few months. Until one day Mom picks me up and brings me over. I see Daniel's car outside, but the tires are slashed and his windshield wipers are torn off. His Xbox is in the yard along with half his clothes. Again, Mom would not tell me why. About a couple of years ago, she told me it was because she walked in on him smoking crack in the living room. It was at this point, after 5 years of her boyfriends and after being away for probably 7 or 8 years in total, that she decided to move back in with the dads. Because yes, they are still living together. They are not friends, they are not lovers, they are nothing to each other. It is strange. So she moves back home and decides to get a job at a local Dunkin' Donuts. It does not take long before she comes home telling me about Greg, who will not leave her alone unless she lets him take her to breakfast. It does not take long before she stops coming home again. About a month and a half later, a snowstorm is approaching. She tells me she wants us to get snowed in at Greg's since I will not have school. Fed up with her antics, I tell her that sounds great and we go. It is instantly awkward. We have an uncomfortably quiet dinner. Mom urges me to go take a bath for some bizarre reason. I am 15 now. I have not taken a bath in about 10 years, just showers. Then she practically force-fed me Benadryl and I slept for 15 hours straight. Remember this moment because we will come back to it later. The next day after I finally wake up, Mom and I watch Twilight, and then she brings me home. Months later, I go out with my boyfriend at the time and my mother allows me to take her car. He texts me the following day and says he thinks he left his wallet in the car and asks if I can check for it. So I dig under the seat and I pull out this green box. Curious, I open it up and there is a considerable amount of marijuana inside, which was still illegal at the time. I put the box back, retrieve my boyfriend's wallet, and go inside. My mother asks me, so you found the box, huh? I nod and ask her, do I want to know where you are getting it from? Greg is selling it to her for a discount. That night when she gave me all the Benadryl, it was because they wanted to smoke and she did not want me to know about it. Now this is where the story concludes for a while. I am 16 here and our next event occurs when I am just shy of 21. Mom and the dads are still living together. I am in college, my older siblings have all moved out and unfortunately my mother's father has passed away. It is just me, my mom, Lucas, Chris, and Elijah living at home. Mom and I are out and about one day and she says she has something to tell me. She looks at me and says, I just wanted you to know that Chris and I have decided to give the marriage another chance. I am stunned, especially because this man still does not know about her boyfriends. She refuses to discuss it at all and says she wants to leave it in the past and forget it happened. I simply tell her that I am happy they are trying to work things out because what else am I supposed to say? But there is a catch. She tells me, do not tell Lucas about it though. So it is another game of do not tell the dads, but the other man is my other dad. Mom and Chris reconciled for about 11 months until Mom threw a significant scene at a major life event. I will not go into details for privacy reasons, and he finally decided enough was enough. He left to stay with his father for a couple of weeks, and when he returned, he began the process of filing for divorce. After all those years and everything that happened, the straw finally broke the camel's back. They got divorced and Chris moved away. Mom and Lucas still live together, just the two of them now. They are not together and they genuinely cannot stand each other, but they need one another. And that is where we are now. There is more to my story, especially regarding my personal relationships with friends and Elijah's abuse, but this is all I am sharing for now. Maybe if people are interested, I will update with more, and I am also happy to answer any questions in the comments. Thank you for reading. Story 5. I'm 21 and my relationship with Abby has gone from I love you to I'm ruining myself for you. After our breakup, I obsessively tracked her online and we ended up back together, engaging in risky behaviors and even self-harm. Now I'm lost in this toxic cycle. I feel like I'm using her for comfort, even as she digs deeper into her struggles. I'm exhausted and know I need to end it, but addiction to her love feels impossible to escape. Can I truly break free? My relationship with Abby has been chaotic, a true roller coaster of extreme highs and devastating lows. We initially ended things in early February. It was terrible. She had numerous anxieties and insecurities, constantly accusing me of being unlovable and a cheater and claiming that everyone disliked me. It really affected my mental state. After the breakup, I was a mess. I experienced intense emotional pain, resembling a physical weight on my chest. I could not stop thinking about her, obsessively checking her Blue Sky account and any other social media I could locate. I was desperate for validation, so I hastily downloaded Tinder and Hinge. The likes provided momentary pleasure, but when the messages started arriving, I panicked. My friends and family urged me to avoid her, claiming she was detrimental to my well-being. My friend Chris even assisted me in removing all her belongings and suggested that I delete her number, which I did. I felt so hollow, as if I had lost a part of myself. I even contemplated reuniting with her if she showed improvement, and that was the original plan, but Chris and others persuaded me that it was a terrible choice. Logically, I knew they were correct. I recalled hearing that the emotional part of the brain can actually draw blood and resources from the logical side, and I fully understood that. I had this constant, tight, anxious feeling in my stomach. I could not relax. Every waking moment was consumed by thoughts of her. I longed to see her, touch her, talk to her, and text her. I felt as if she was ideal for me, but I also recognized that she was struggling. I even began to blame myself, thinking I exacerbated her anxiety and self-hatred. She would skip meals at times, believing I would prefer her more if she were slim. She suspected I would cheat, which frightened me because honestly I had dreamed of being with other people. Although I never acted on it, the thought lingered. At the end, she said terrible things, claiming I was self-centered and everyone hated me. She even used how my friends treated me as ammunition, essentially labeling me unlovable. The most terrifying part was that I thought she might be right. It felt as though she could see inside my mind. She was aware that the decision to break up was not solely mine. I felt like a terrible person. I was lonely, I had been bullied while growing up, and I had always struggled to forge friendships. I felt an urgent need to be loved. Perhaps I feared abandonment, so I left first. Yet she had repeatedly hurt me. She would yell at me, pick fights over trivial issues, belittle me, and make me feel as though everything was my fault. Then there was the incident in which she harmed herself and sent me a photograph. Initially, I thought it was simply a tactic to get me to see her, but when we met a few days later, she made it sound like her life was genuinely at risk. I felt like a monster for not being there for her. I felt incredibly lost and isolated. I felt like a failure with few friends. The silence in my apartment was overwhelming. I spent hours playing video games that I did not even enjoy. I believed that since someone loved me and was infatuated with me, I had found the solution. I could just avoid the uncomfortable aspects of life and spend that time with someone I loved. I still did love her, but that was the issue. I understood she could not be good for me. Then, approximately 2.5 weeks after the breakup, I ended up reconciling with her. I know that was not the plan, and it occurred very rapidly. We were both in a highly vulnerable state. We skipped classes, spent nearly all our time together, and it felt temporarily relieving, like an escape from the pain I had been experiencing. However, it swiftly became unhealthy. We engaged in some dangerous behaviors. We even began harming each other. It started as a fantasy, and then we acted on it. We used razor blades. I recognize the seriousness of this situation, and I am not attempting to downplay it. At the time, it felt intensely thrilling, almost addictive, but I also experienced significant guilt and shame afterward. We had a pregnancy scare, which was incredibly stressful, but the test result was negative. Additionally, she revealed she had been with another man physically shortly after our initial breakup, which was very distressing and felt like a betrayal, even though we were not technically together at that time. After a few days of this behavior, we attempted to establish boundaries. We discussed taking a break while remaining exclusive, limiting alcohol consumption, and focusing on our own well-being. However, her friends and family were strongly opposed to our being together, which appeared to influence her. We were supposed to limit contact on certain days, but we could not adhere to that. Then 2 weeks ago, things escalated once more. I ended up cutting myself with scissors while intoxicated, which is likely to leave a scar, and then did it again while sober a couple of days later. I called Abby and she came over. I was extremely distressed and walked into traffic, which frightened her significantly. We went to her home and she bandaged my wounds. Later, I returned to my place and I eventually informed my friends about what had transpired, although I minimized the situation. The next day, she harmed herself again, which deeply worried me. We were also supposed to be stopping the self-harm, but we have not. More recently, I discovered she had been engaging in sexual conversations with another individual who is 28 years old, even while we were supposedly trying to make things work. That was a devastating blow, and I have only been able to sleep for an hour or two each night since then. I am essentially unable to function. I know rationally that this relationship is over, but I am still behaving as though it is not. I am inviting her over and treating her kindly despite understanding that it is a poor decision. I feel as though I am using her for comfort and I feel awful about it. She recently doubled her medication and claims to feel terrible and suicidal. I am concerned for her, but I also recognize that I need to prioritize my own well-being. I have been unable to sleep or eat properly. I am skipping practice and classes. I am pretending I can manage this, but I cannot. My friends are urging me to end things, and I know they are correct. I need to terminate this relationship entirely, but I am finding it exceedingly difficult. I feel addicted to her in a sense. I feel hopeless and overwhelmed. I still cannot sleep for more than an hour or two each night, and I have constant headaches due to sleep deprivation and my inability to eat. Since this situation began, I have lost 20 pounds, and I recognize breakups are challenging, but this feels like something outside the norm. I have attempted everything within my power to achieve normal sleep and proper nourishment, but I believe what I need most right now is time to heal. In summary, my relationship with Abby has been an emotional roller coaster of extreme highs and severe lows. We broke up in February, but I struggled to move on, obsessing over her and feeling lost. Against my better judgment, we reconciled, but things rapidly became unhealthy, involving risky behaviors, self-harm, and emotional distress. She was unfaithful, and I spiraled downward, losing sleep, skipping classes, and neglecting my well-being. Despite knowing I need to sever ties, I am struggling to let go. I am exhausted, emotionally drained, and eager to heal, but breaking free feels impossible.